Hi, this is John from Level 0 NPCs, bringing you today's ThursDev. I've called it 5 Myths About Game Reviews, but really, I wrote up a script and everything, but I've decided I'm just going to wing it. I have a lot to talk about when it comes to this subject. I was managing editor at MMORPG.com, and before that I was news and community editor at that same site. In total, I worked there for about 7 years, so I have a little bit of experience with reviews. As editor, I read, of course, and edited. Over the course of my career, I'd say I've read close to 100 reviews, if not more. And I have to tell you, it is the absolute most misunderstood feature when you're a games journalist, especially if you're a review specialist, reviewer. It's very frustrating sometimes because I don't think people really understand anymore what a review actually is supposed to accomplish and what it means. The first myth I'd like to talk about today is the idea that content publishing companies review games. I so often hear things like, I only read MMORPG.com's reviews, or I only trust Polygon, or I only read Touch Arcade, these sort of things. Doing that is exactly what the publisher wants you to do, so whoever's actually publishing it, whether it's YouTube or whether it's MMORPG.com, it doesn't really matter. The content provider wants you to associate all of their reviews as their reviews so that you keep coming back and generating, of course, unique hits and page views and all those fun things that are important in the world of websites. The thing is, that's not how reviews really work. Reviews are very, very specific to the person who created them. What you actually should do as a consumer, if you really do actually want to get something out of the review and find somebody who can recommend things for you to try that you are more than likely to like, I highly recommend taking note of the name on the review. So who wrote it? Find out who wrote it. Most game writing these days is taking place by freelancers, so no, they're not tied to any one site, so what they'll do is they'll work for a bunch. Google the author's name. If you like them, you'll be able to track them down and find some other things that they've written and some other sites that they generally write for. Become a fan of that particular writer rather than holding fast to being a fan of one website or one YouTube channel in and of itself. It's the smart thing to do, like I said, if what you're looking for is like an in-depth analysis so you can help yourself make a decision about what games to buy and what to maybe pass on. Number 2. Scores are the most important part of the review. God, it hurts me so much, and myself and almost every other games journalist I've ever spoken to, every professional reviewer I've ever spoken to, has said things like, I really, really never want to give a game a score. It just causes confusion, it makes people angry, and it doesn't actually serve a purpose. The reason we give scores is because that's what draws in the hits. It's kind of a non-starter, even with publishers that agree with you, because it makes a big difference in the number of reads that you get. Problem is, people start to forget that there is a rest of the review once they've seen the score. Oftentimes in the reviews that I was writing, people would go right to the forums about whatever the review score was, whether it was a high score or a low score. They would go directly to the forums and either complain about it or defend it, and vehemently, like they will freak out at each other over the score. They will freak out. I've been called some nasty, nasty names because of review scores. That's how off-putting these things are. I think I've had a death threat because of it. It's just one of those things people get really upset about, and there's absolutely no reason for it. Bearing in mind that this is still only a score, and they haven't actually looked at the rest of the review. In the review, I actually laid out a lot of my reasoning for the score that I gave. There was a whole lot more information actually in the body of the review that supported the score. Scores are completely meaningless without more context. It's one of the reasons I have an issue with sites like Metacritic that just take aggregates of all these scores and jam them together and grab an average using whatever formula it is that they use. They're missing all of the actual substance of these reviews, and the number doesn't really mean anything. It's flashy, it gets them a lot of hits, it gets them a lot of attention. I don't know if it still happens like this, but back when I was still a journalist, PR people actually wouldn't get bonuses if the Metacritic score wasn't high enough. The problem is, while it brings the hits in and it makes everybody happy. Scores don't tell the whole story. Scores don't actually give you any impression of what the reviewer actually thought of the game, or really what the score was based on. Does the website or YouTube channel or whatever it happens to be base its reviews specifically on how innovative a game is? There are a lot of people that are very interested in that. Things are so niche now that you can't get that much from a score, and it just doesn't make sense, and it's not a real number. It's fake. Moving on to myth number 3. Okay. This one, there's a lot of baggage behind this one. Before I even get to it, I'm not trying to bring up all that crap. I'm just talking about the myth that all reviewers are corrupt. Or I should say all professional reviewers are corrupt. It's a fairly popular thing. It's something that reviewers will hear from readers and viewers all the time on their reviews, no matter what they say. You're going to hear that they're either being paid off by the game company that made the game if it's a good review, or the game company that made an opposing game if it's a bad review. There's really no winning with this one. And because of one or two incidents in the past, it's sort of colored all of games journalism to seem like it's completely corrupt. The thing is, reviewers are not making much money for what they do. I did work it all out, so I am just going to go to my script for a second as I say that as of the writing of this article, the going rate for a 1,000-word review, if the publishers bother to pay the writer at all, is anywhere between $25 and $40 American, roughly. For that, the reviewer has to buy the game. Occasionally the game is provided, I'll be honest about that, but that's not really the case as much anymore as it used to be. Then you have to play the game either all the way through or even on the light side for a significant number of hours, and then they actually have to write the review. So when you actually add it all up, that's a bare minimum of 8 hours of work. I think it's generally more than that, but let's say it's an 8-hour day of work. In other words, these reviewers are making between $3.12 an hour and $5 an hour. These people aren't in it for the money, unless their math is really, really absolutely bad. They do it because they love doing it. For the most part, sometimes it's a little about the money. They're just not likely to risk their reputations, because like I said earlier on in this episode, most reviewers nowadays are actually freelancers, so they require a decent reputation so that they can continue to get work, and so on and so on. So, I'll make this reference to me because I cannot tell you the number of times I was accused of taking bribes. It never once happened, and I will demonstrate this just by talking a little bit about what my living situation was at the time. I was living in an apartment downtown in Halifax, Nova Scotia, with 3 other guys, sharing rent, utilities, all of that. I was driving a Toyota Corolla that was, probably like 8 or 9 years old at the time. And that was it. I wasn't living some sort of high rich life. I wasn't getting bought out by game companies. It's an absolute myth. To me, it was never worth risking my reputation in my career for a one-time payout that, let's be honest, was not going to be huge. It's not actually worth that much money to publishers or PR people to have a good review. Put on top of that the fact that over my entire career of writing reviews, I think I was maybe offered a bribe once the whole time. And it was from a very disreputable company. It was very awkward. I turned it down flat because it was weird. It just isn't something that comes up that often. And MMORPG.com is considered, or was at the time, considered to be a fairly important website to be on for MMOs. So I figure someone at some point in that organization would have had to receive a bribe, and it never happened. I have no conceivable reason to lie to you about this. You know, some reviewers are biased in favor of one company or another, or one game or another stuff. I mean, there's all kinds of brands of this, but as far as people taking money to write a positive review, it's unusual, and it usually happens at the publisher level as opposed to the reviewer level. Number 4, Anyone talking about a specific game is reviewing it. This one's a little bit weird, and I think I know how it happened, and I'll talk about that for a minute. But if you think that just an article about a game is a review, stop thinking that. It's absolutely wrong. You're woefully, misinformed, and you need to ask for some kind of refund from your high school English teacher because they ripped you off. They ripped you off hard. A review requires critical analysis to be of any value whatsoever as a review. That's what it is. It's critical analysis, positive and negative, an understanding of the market that it's in, and all of this other fine stuff that gets wrapped up into it. That's not necessarily the case for every time that people talk about a game, even when they talk about their opinion of a game. So I think that the move all started, or at least gained the most traction, when Yahtzee started creating zero punctuation. Zero punctuation is absolutely hilarious. I'm a big, big, big fan. He obviously works very hard on them. He's got a great deal of industry knowledge. He's very good at looking at a game and pulling out aspects. And he's really just extraordinarily entertaining. That doesn't make his work reviews. So the reason they're not reviews is obviously not because they don't have scores. The reason that they're not reviews is because they're presented in a way that is comedic in nature. It's done strictly to, inform a little bit, but it's strictly entertainment value. The best comparison I can think of is like The Daily Show or Last Week Tonight, those kinds of shows, and sort of the difference between those entertainment comedy shows and the news. There's value in elements of the news within those shows, but you really shouldn't take them as your news source. They're definitely only coming at it from a specific direction. You know what else isn't a review? And this brings us to our last topic, I promise, the last myth for the day. And that's that a summary of a game is the same as a review of a game. I can't tell you the number of times, even just in recent memory, that I've seen reviews, so it's got a score on it, the label on it is I'm doing a review, or I'm reviewing this game or that game, or a review of. And then it's either a long explanation of, or a lot of words describing what they did in the game and the game's features without offering any distinct commentary whatsoever. To me, and the era that I grew up in, it reminds me of reading the back of a novel to find out what's in it and calling that a review. It's just wrong. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Have you noticed that's a recurring theme in this show? Anyway, I've taken up more than enough of your time, but I do hope that our time together today has sort of shed some light on what I honestly believe are some of the worst myths surrounding games journalism and especially game reviewing. I think I have a unique perspective on it, so I really do hope you enjoyed it. And next week, I believe we're going to have Luke again talking about game design.